Thank you. Thank you very much. Sure. I won't take too long because it's not my show. It's Williams and. You know, you want me to do it all? Sure. All right. We got 2 paintings right here. He'll give me $100. He'll give me no. Now, we'll want a little more than 100. I can assure you. We'll start at 5. No. So, you know, when you think of an artist like William Haskell, he's unique. He's really unique. And when he contacted me in 2019, it was very interesting because I guess it took him a little, you weren't exactly, you were a little concerned that maybe I wouldn't want you, right?
Yeah, fear of rejection.
No. He was. And it was just the opposite for me, right? It was like, oh my God, I'd love to show your work. It was, right? I mean, it was, I knew his work, I knew all about it, it was fantastic. If anything, it was me like, God, I wish I could get him, you know? And so it was a match made in heaven. He's a slow painter. So this is a good thing and a bad thing. It's good for collectors because there's not that much out there, but for dealers, it's torture. But that's okay because I can assure you every piece that he does in his mind is as good as he could have done. And that's a gift and it's a curse. It's a gift for us, it's a curse for the artist because he has to struggle to make it as best as he can. Now, the only kind of personality that could do that is someone who has the ability to look at things and paint for hours upon hours upon hours. These paintings a single painting can take him, 2 weeks to do, which is a long time for an artist. He'll have to do at least 20 or more layers to get what he wants. Now, when you look at these paintings, and I highly encourage you to look at these and come to our show that opens on Friday and look at those, you can see the density, the texture that cannot be reproduced. Somebody couldn't come in and say, I'm just going to paint like him, because they can't, unless they have some kind of disorder that allows them to do that, which is, we'll talk about that a little bit, as a matter of fact. So I found out a little bit of his work ethics just because I wanted to know from his wife. And so it's interesting how you do these. He gets up at about 8 a.m., and you would think, oh, he's dressed really nice. No, sweats. He's got sweats on. He's on sweats all day long. Look at the smile. Yeah, that's true, yes. Yeah. I asked her, she said, no, he'll be fine. No cowboy hat either. And he's going to stay in that room from 8 a.m., he'll probably break for lunch, till 7 p.m., 6 days a week, doing the little minute work that it requires. And he's watching dinosaur movies as he does this. Is that true?
Yellowstone.
And Yellowstone, yeah. And this is actually very typical for artists, is they like to have music or something playing, especially things that aren't maybe gripping as much, but just fill the air. And if you look at these things, and artists have told me this, that there's a musical kind of component into their art. And you'll definitely see these kind of things. And the cactus you see, well, they collect cactus. And he might spend part of his morning looking at cactus and communing with the cactus to get that sensibility. And he's known for these cactus. I mean, if you look at this, you can see some of them. His saguaros are as good as anybody's, maybe better. And in fact, we have a nice one in the show. I highly encourage you to look at it. I looked at it closely today, and it has all these little ridges that you follow, just like saguaros do. Intense to do that. I don't know who would do that, but William Haskell. And when I look at this, I really do feel it's magical. I think there's a magic into his creativity that few artists actually capture. And so we're very fortunate, I'm very fortunate to have him in my gallery, and I think we're very fortunate to have him here to maybe fill in the rest of the story. William Haskell.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Mark. Very kind words, a wonderful compliment, so thank you. And thank you for inviting me. It is wonderful to be here. I'd like to thank my wife for coming and being a part of this journey and making me a part of her journey as well. And we love coming to Tucson. It's such a welcoming, inspirational town, and we really, really enjoy being here. And so it's a great compliment to be invited here. So thank you. I've always been drawn to the desert. Even as a young child, I loved the desert. I loved cactus. I loved bones. Things that really spoke to me like that. And so I've got a slideshow that Angela put together, and we'll start off with some of the work that's from my past, and it'll tell the story of how we got to this place. And the beginning piece is a new painting that I created for the show at Mark's Gallery, and it's called Tempest Over Sacred Ground. And it's the first one. The tornado is a reoccurring motif and metaphor in some of my work. And I grew up in the Midwest. In Ohio, specifically, we lived with tornadoes every spring and summer. And but I wanted to take that subject and create something that wasn't just a devastating event. It was more optimistic, and because to me it symbolizes change in your life, and how we're all going to go through things that are good or bad, and sometimes they seem bad, and in the end they turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. But that's the tornado, and so I place it as a narrative in different paintings to tell a story, and which is something I like to do with my work. And Chuck touched on, and by the way, thank you, Chuck, for the words. Very kind of you, and very observant. As I learned more and more about, let me begin by saying I was born in Wisconsin, in Madison, Wisconsin, in 1963. So, any Wisconsin people? All right, cool. That's fewer than I thought. All right, and we moved almost immediately to Alabama, and then Louisiana for my dad's job. And during that time, my parents, who were both had artistic tendencies, they noticed that I liked to draw, and I had a facility for that. And they nurtured that and helped me with it. And then by the time I was 8, it had me in some different painting classes. And I was always had a lot of interest in painting realistically. And so this next early influences, my parents were both antique dealers, and so they had an antique shop. After Louisiana, we moved to Ohio, central Ohio, and they had an antique shop where they specifically dealt in early American. And sometimes they would have work by James Audubon. And I loved it because it was wildlife and it was done very meticulously. And so I would spend a lot of time, reflecting on his work and doing my own rendition of it. And he was a really early influence. And later, when I was 16, I did a year-long apprenticeship with a professional wildlife artist in Wisconsin. And that's what I had intended to do with myself. And it was... through a series of events, I realized that it was probably going to be a little too tedious for me to do that. And I wanted to do something that was more uniquely my own. And that is where I started to go. But these are 2 different commissions I did. And one is a kestrel, and he's in Galisteo, New Mexico, and holding a prairie rattler. And it was a commission for a couple from Lexington, Kentucky, and then the other one was done for the Santa Fe Wine Festival, and of course it's a raven, which is a patron saint of wine, and that shows the backdrop of El Rancho de las Golondrinas. And so Audubon was a very early influence, and next would be George O'Keeffe. Being born in Wisconsin, my mother was from Wisconsin. Anything from Wisconsin is the best. And George O'Keeffe was from Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. And so she introduced me to a few artists, and this one of the ones was George O'Keeffe. And I liked bones, and I think this really influenced my modern leanings at an early age. And so from there, I became interested in and really developed a strong interest in the first 50 years of the 20th century for my sphere of influence. And there's about 30 different artists in there, but the periods of influence are really things like Cubism, Modernism, Surrealism, and Regionalism. And there's all this wonderful work that was being created at that time, and a lot of it was the WPA project and that kind of thing. And of course, Maynard Dixon is one of the folks from that time period. And so George O'Keeffe was an early influence, and I've always loved her work. And in 1997, made it out to Santa Fe to go to the museum there right after it opened. So I always loved her work. And Andrew Wyeth and the Wyeth family, including NC, was also very influential to my work. And one of my favorite paintings, of course, is Wind from the Sea. And he used a lot of different narratives. And one thing that people talked about with him is that he painted so realistically, but he really didn't paint, according to him, he didn't really paint realistically at all. And his work was much more invented than it was done from a realistic standpoint, and that always affected my thinking, because for years I was very interested in making things look the way they actually are, and the more I did that, the more I became tired of it, and the more I became interested in creating my own world, so to speak. And I wanted to create something that people would know it was mine from across the room. They wouldn't have to look for a signature. And so the painting is my signature, and the painting is, with every artist, is a self-portrait. And we're all painting our inner being. And it's been a really extraordinary process, getting to know a lot of artists, especially in Santa Fe. And when you see their work and you meet this artist, I mean, it's just uncanny how much this work will resemble who they are as a person. It's really quite extraordinary, I think. So the blowing curtain was always something that was really impactful to me. And that began at a really early age. We were living in Alabama, and I had gone to a stop with my mother, and we were parked in a parking lot, and across the street was a tenement building. I mean, it was old, it was very kind of decrepit, and out of one of the windows was this frayed curtain blowing, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. I mean, it was very impactful. You could feel the emotion in it, and so that's always been a narrative I've carried through my work, and to me it just represents how we reflect on the past, and how you can really have these kind of wistful feelings about that, and how you can get caught up in it, and how that is an important aspect to everyone's life. And so that's what the blowing curtain really means. It's kind of, and of course here I'll use that's the blowing curtain. There we go, to use that. As I progressed, after my apprenticeship, after I graduated from high school, I had a strong interest in art and went into graphic design because growing up in the Midwest in the 80s, you're not really led to believe that art is going to be a profession. So I decided to pursue graphic design, and something that I never liked. I knew I wasn't going to do it the day I graduated, but I wanted to get a degree and move forward. And so I went into advertising, which was a good gig. There were years where it was fun, and it was exciting, and it was a good career for a little while. And I remember sitting in traffic one day, and Minneapolis, a lot of heavy traffic, and you have the moment of clarity where you're thinking, not only am I wasting my life doing this, but what if I applied this amount of energy to what I really wanted to do? And it was a total moment of clarity for me. And I knew I was going to get the hell out of advertising, okay? So I had this little block that sits in my studio, and the words on it say, what would you do if you knew you could not fail? And so that's the question. What would you do? I mean, anybody can ask themselves that question. And I remember the day, it was my final day. I went around, I spent a month going around to see my clients. And some of them I was very close to. And it was such an interesting experience. And because the ones that were my age were like, you're crazy. You know, how can you leave a job like this? But the guys who were in their 60s or 70s were like, good for you, kid, don't ever come back. And it was a very interesting social experiment almost. And it's amazing because every one of those people had a dream that they were not fulfilling. Every one of them wanted to do something other than what they were doing. And so for me, it became immediately clear, like, there's no way I'm doing this for another second. When I remember not to get off the subject here, but I remember telling my father, okay, and he was pretty pragmatic. I mean, most of the time his advice to me was get down to brass tacks, and he was. When I told him I was going to move to Santa Fe and be an artist, he's like, and he had moved to northern Wisconsin to carve ducks. He's like, do you remember that duck thing I did? And I said, yes, I do. And he's like, that was the dumbest thing I ever did. And so I was like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And and then they ended up moving to Santa Fe. Anyway, I moved to Santa Fe specifically because it's you can have a real, almost spiritual experience there. I mean, it really is a wonderful place. And it's a great art market, and it's a beautiful place, and it's an inspirational place. And so I started to paint a lot of the area, and at that time I was working in dry brush watercolor. And Northern Homestead is a piece I did in 2010, obviously, and it's painted in dry brush watercolor. So, which is a heavy application of watercolor paint. You let it dry completely. You continue to apply layers. And at the end of it, I would varnish it. And it's got a very unique look. The challenge with it is the paint is really not designed to do that. So by 2012, I had reached the point where, here's another early influence. So Salvador Dali. I love surrealism. And I liked his work because he was so technically skilled. And so that's why I was drawn to his work. But it was also I found it very interesting, it was just very thought-provoking. So he was a really early influence of mine as well, and that's a painting I did last year of a saguaro cactus, and just I love to shape it and create the movement of it with the cactus. And so this was actually a painting I did before I moved to New Mexico. So it was an oil painting, and it's a painting of Geronimo, and it's done more in a modernist style, and that is something I did for a couple of years, and then returned to watercolor as a medium. So in 2012, I received a residency at this place called Brush Creek Ranch, which is in Saratoga, Wyoming. And it was for a month. It's owned by a family in Chicago, amazing place, and they have an arts foundation. And I went there, and you go there with a specific purpose in mind. And my purpose was to recreate what I really wanted to do. And because I was doing these dry brush watercolor paintings, very realistic, and I found I was just tired from it. And I wanted to do something that was more exciting and more moving and more emotional, you know. And so my whole purpose for going there was to create the work that I'm currently doing now, and begin to develop that work. And so and the more I did it, the more I realized how important having that emotional element in paintings are. To me, it's really the number one thing. You have to have mood, emotion, and then it's technique. And if you can speak to someone and capture them emotionally, I don't think they'll ever forget your painting, and they'll love living with it too. And for me, that's how I look at art. I mean, Angela and I, we collect a lot of art, and the pieces we buy, they speak to us, and we love having them as part of our family. You know, it's just such an important aspect. So I stayed there for a month and created 6 paintings, and they were the beginning of the work I'm doing now. And they were acrylic on panel, so I moved away from watercolor at that point. And I liked the way I was painting with watercolor is really it wasn't designed that way, so I wanted to find a medium that was. So acrylic turned out to be an excellent fit for what I do. And it was a move that was very exciting. Another thing I decided to do was stop working from photography and not worry about capturing every single nuance. Now, I will still have photographic references if it's a new subject or something, but by and large, the things that I paint are created from my imagination or my experiences or just from sketching. And once I was able to release that, the freedom was really incredible, because I was constantly doing this. I was looking at my painting, looking at the photo, and did I capture it? Does it look like the photo? And that is, I think it's pretty common with a lot of the artists that I know and that I've studied with. And for me, it's like I wanted to free myself from that. And that turned out to be one of the best things I did for my career and my psyche. It was such a wonderful experience then to paint, And the only thing you have to be careful of is when you work from your head, you have a tendency to repeat yourself. So I do lots of different layouts, and I get a lot of intervention from Angela on trying new things, and so which is great. We use each other as a sounding board, and she is also a fine artist, and so we like to go back and forth and advise each other and critique each other. And most of the time, it's great and extremely helpful. So that was Brush Creek Ranch, and it was a pivotal point. Really wonderful experience. So some of the blessings I've had including Mark, I've done shows at some different museums, which are terrific. It's a great way to put yourself out there, and so I do a number of different events throughout the year, and some of them will come and go, but it's part of the process of building your career as an artist and getting in front of just different folks in different cities. So it's been an exciting part of art, These are a couple of paintings that are in the show with Mark, and Steward of the Sacred Sky is a brand new composition that I wanted to try, and it was an idea that Angela actually talked with me about, and getting that. Creating the entrance with the person wrapped in the blanket, looking into the distance, and using the structure of the cloud to embrace them as almost in an iconic way. And then the Chill of the Ancient Night is a painting about the Taos Pueblo, which is a really inspirational place. And winter is such a alternative and beautiful palette compared to summer and fall. So it's and painting the night sky and just the colors of New Mexico. In the evening, in the winter, is such a treat to be able to do that. I paint buffalo. It's one of there's a few wildlife subjects I like to address, and I like the buffalo. It has a very modern sentiment. And for example, in this painting, the javelina is the same thing. It just presents itself in almost like a piece of modern sculpture. And I love the silhouettes of them, so they make ideal subjects, and that's why I like to include them. And they represent a different area and a different, part of our culture, where the buffalo, I think, is such an important part of our culture and has such deep meaning, So, and this is, of course, is a white buffalo. So the first one I did was called Big Medicine, and it was done for a show that I did with based in spirit animals, and so that is the buffalo painting. So Thorned Elegance is another painting you'll see at Mark's gallery for the show, and it's a prickly pear cactus, one of my favorite subjects. That, along with the saguaro, I love the sculptural qualities of it, and its silhouette and the shapes it takes and the colors it has. and then creating the world around it, and kind of embracing it in the clouds and using the monsoons, which, this is monsoons. I like to include them because water is always an issue, and for me, there's nothing more optimistic. So I use it as a symbol of optimism in the desert. The other one, Enchant and Return, is a painting I did of Taos. And once again, going back to the winter palette and at night. And if you've been in New Mexico at that time, it is cold, but it can be this beautiful, inspiring time. And the smell of no matter where you are in the world, if you smell that smell, it's the smell of pinyon burning, and it just can bring back so many memories in such a wonderful way. And so Chuck mentioned the white. So I'll use another metaphor is the smoke. It's kind of like to show, that kind of that warmth, that by the hearth, that kind of thing. So I like to give the buildings. I used to paint abandoned structures, and as I moved on, I wanted to paint structures that had life in them. And I wanted to show that they had life on with the windows lit and the smoke coming out of the chimney and that kind of thing, to show that there's life there and there's someone coming to pay a visit. And so those are a couple of more influences. This one was a piece that was sold at the Idle George Museum, and it was really a reflection on one of my favorite artists, Maynard Dixon, and he would paint these monolithic structures of rock, and I've always been drawn to those. His work from the 30s and 40s are some of my favorite pieces of art ever. The way he reflected on the desert, instead of necessarily going out and painting things from life, he would create these, which turned into these very geometric and I think fantastically modernized paintings that were so far ahead of everything else out there that I just find them very inspirational, as do a number of other artists. But that was really the basis of that painting, and almost taking the monolithic land structure and incorporating that in the clouds so that things are intertwined together. And then introducing a river, once again, water is optimism, water is life, and then being able to use that river to create this this cubist, prismatic, reflective service, which I want to make uniquely my own. I want that to paint a river just like myself, like no one else. And so I think that's what helps separate you from other artists. And I think it's important to do that in art. It's the artist's job is not only to create something really compelling, but something unique, a unique reflection that you really need to think about, and so that's what I've always tried to do as an artist, is to really convey that. And so that was a piece that we both, Andrew and I, enjoyed, and I thought it was successful. So part of the process is I sketch everything out, and some of why things take a while is because I'll draw them out 5 or 6 times. So I'll make a small sketch as a conceptual idea, and then I'll decide on it, and then I'll draw it out full size, and then part of my process is to transfer it by making a transfer out of tracing paper and put it on the panel. And so the great thing about that is I become really connected to the piece because I've drawn it so many times. And it helps kind of introduce the piece to me. I get excited about it. I understand during that process of where I want to take it and what I want to do. And so this is a drawing for a recent painting that was a commission piece. And so that's the drawing that was chosen for the piece. And then the painting, when it was finished, looked like that. And so it was a gradual evolution. And they have a house in Scottsdale, and they wanted to have all the things they love, and their house moved out in the desert, away from where it was, and have it surrounded with all the things that they love. And so that was the piece, and his favorite painting was Starry Night, Max's favorite painting, and so that is what it became. And so that's just a little part of the process that I go through to create the paintings. If you guys have any questions, do not hesitate to interrupt. Just so you know. Okay, so here's the best part of the presentation. So
That was your ad, not mine.
I cannot tell you how important it is to have a rock in your life as an artist. And of course, Angela's my rock, and she comes to all my events and supports me and makes it fun and makes it meaningful, and it's I think every artist can relate to this. And if you have someone who really supports what you're doing, that can mean everything, and it helps you succeed on a level that you couldn't do without that person. Truly. And so, you want to stand up? Angela's so I'll just give her a kudos. So, and we were talking this morning. I met Angela almost the exact same time I started working with Mark Sublette, and obviously it was a great turning point in my life. And so it's incredibly important to have, for myself, to have that support, and it works both ways, of course, and to have that person in your life, and that, I believe. Oh, okay. So, that's the statement. What would you do if you knew you could not fail? And this is a painting that, of course, is a tornado, and it's about the Midwest. I do some different. Most of the paintings I do are about the West. About 20% of them are from the Midwest, because I came from the Midwest, and I still find it to be an inspirational area. And so I use the wheat stack. It's a metaphor on the old times, the way they used to, the way farming was done. And to me, it's such a symbolic thing when you see it. Once again, going back to, if you see a silhouette of it and you've ever seen one in real life, you realize immediately what it is and what it means. And so it's always been a subject I like to work with, that and a small farmhouse. And I use a smaller house like that because I like to show on a scale like where we are as a species and where the world is around us, and how because we can sometimes be absorbed, and how important it is to reflect on the size of the world around us. And so that's really why I'll put the small houses in there sometimes, and of course the tornadoes in there, which symbolizes the change in your life. That's the metaphor. And so that was that's a painting I did recently, and it's a subject I really enjoy working with. That's it.